stable for decades, which now Trump has completely reversed. And it's the trade wars, it's the NATO skepticism, it's admiring strongmen. And from Europe's perspective, it's not just that the United States has become sort of unreliable, it's actually become dangerous, potentially. And the part that should really raise people's eyebrows is that Russia is laughing. This is Putin's best possible outcome. Fractured democracies and Western allies suspicious of each other. The U.S. at odds with Europe is great for Russia. And all Russia had to do was kind of just go along with the idea of putting a corrupt, narcissistic felon back into power. You don't need tanks, you don't need an invasion, just chaos, disinformation, a willing accomplice, and they have done it expertly. Now, I need to be frank with you about another aspect of this. Americans love to externalize the blame. It's always someone else's fault. Nobody forced this on us at the end of the day. The American public was warned explicitly over and over. Trump got one term during which we saw what he did. He made clear his second term would be even more unhinged. Kamala Harris said it openly and clearly. Trump is a president of hate and war. It's a straightforward assessment. And what happened? Half the country didn't argue the substance. They said, oh, Kamala Harris is bad because of this, there was racism, there was sexism, there was all sorts of stuff. And now look at where we are. Trump's own VP this week falsely accused the mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, of wanting to kill all whites. I mean, just completely made up stuff, incitement with no evidence. And what do Americans do? Like mild outrage, a few tweets, and back scrolling. Look at what happened with the Maduro thing. Look at what's going on with all of these. This is like a sleepwalking that is going on. Now compare that, for example, South Korea, where the president attempted a coup, and within a week he was out, removed, prosecuted. That is a society that understands democracy doesn't survive on vibes alone. You need consequences. And meanwhile, in the United States, we've normalized the unthinkable, and half the country excuses it, we both sides it, we wait for institutions to save us, and half the country is just like shrugging, and the other half is understandably exhausted. So when Europeans start openly debating, do we need to decouple from the United States? Do we need to separate militarily? Do we need to separate economically and strategically? It's not that they're being anti-American. They are self-preserving and realizing what is going on. It's not tone that will collapse alliances, not normally anyway. Its values start to diverge. And it's hard to see more divergent values than those which Donald Trump is putting forward now. Now, there's a final uncomfortable truth that bears comment. YouTube creators from Europe are basically asking, does the United States even still believe in limits on power? Like, I've seen a bunch of European YouTubers who were saying, forget about Trump's personality and his bluster and his personal ambition. Does the country under Trump even believe that the desires of others matter, or is it just whatever Trump wants? And terrifying. In his interview earlier this week with Tony DeCopel, and last week he said it also, Trump has said really the only limit is morality. If he'll go, yeah, of course, sure, the Constitution maybe, but we have a situation where the democratic world is preparing for a future where the United States does not believe that there are limits on its power because Donald Trump doesn't seem to believe that. And it's terrifyingly sad that Europe is now saying we need to just get away from the alliance. Terrifying. But I can't say I don't understand. Because if I was in their position, I would probably do the same thing. Biden. It was all very Biden. Republican Congressman and Senate Speaker of the House MAGA Mike Johnson appeared on Fox News with Bill Hemmer. No matter what topic, you can bet your ass that Joe Biden somehow is right. Here is Mike Johnson talking about ICE and says that a lot of what is going on right now is a result of previous administrations. Let's take a listen.
They have to. On ICE, you know that's the story out of Minnesota. We've been covering it 24/7 as everybody else has, in print and here on cable. Democrats wanted to fund ICE. Can they do that?
No, they can't, because Republicans control Congress. This is no time to be playing games with national security and public safety. That's what Democrats are doing, beating the drums up here. Remember what ICE stands for. It's Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They are enforcing the law. They are apprehending the dangerous criminals who are allowed into our country because Joe Biden has his border wide open.
So what's going on now, if you're upset with us right now, they're doing what they have to do because God.
For 4 years, it estimated more than 20 million people came in. Many of them are a great danger to our community. Now, a lot of them have collected in cities like Minneapolis. You know, these sanctuary cities, they're all there, so ICE has to go and do its job. There's a lot of spin on the Democrat side. They're assaulting our law enforcement officers, and they're breaking the law. They need to get out of the way and allow federal law enforcement to do its duty.
Listen, if it weren't for Biden, we wouldn't be in this position. But because we are, everybody's got to let ICE do whatever the hell it wants to do. It's that simple. I wish it were different, but because Joe Biden screwed us so badly, we now are in a position where ICE has to do this. But it's not just on ICE. The topic of the economy came up, affordability. And again, it's Biden. It's Biden all the way down.
Now, do you think the affordability argument's a hoax, as the president has said?
Well, no, what the president's referring to when he calls it a hoax is the Democrats' spin. And it is Bidenomics that got us into this mess. It is Bidenomics, the outrageous spending levels that drove inflation to 40-year highs. That's why prices are up. Now, we got to work on it immediately in January when
Notice that there's no mention of Trump's blanket tariffs that are just crushing everybody.
Republicans took over the Congress, the House, the Senate, and the White House, and we did exactly what we said we were going to do. Bring down inflation, cut taxes.
Now, of course, inflation was 2.4% when Trump took over. It's now 2.7%. But it's all Biden. That's it. But wait, what about the recent GDP number? No, that's Trump. What about the stock market being up? No, that's completely Trump. Anything that appears to be bad that's going on, it's because we're trying to dig out from this endless hole, bottomless hole that Biden put us in. Anything that seems okay is only thanks to Donald Trump. Are voters going to buy this? Are voters buying it right now? We look at the polling, the answer is kind of no, but not by the degree that we would hope. But by a small margin, voters are not buying that the state of the economy today is still because of Joe Biden. However, it should be 100% that realize this is Trump's economy. The blanket tariffs were optional. The instability that Trump is generating is optional. Going after the independence of the Fed chair by demanding that Jerome Powell be fired or considering fire him or replacement and then directing this DOJ probe, which Trump says he has nothing to do with, but lo and behold, they seem to continually go after Trump's adversaries. That is all optional. But we are supposed to believe that the real blame here, the real person responsible for anything that's not going well, is Joe Biden. Now, I really do wish at some point someone would ask one of these Republicans about deflation and really get them on record. You have promised and Trump has promised a decline in prices. You know that if inflation is more than zero, prices continue to go up. Do you really want?
In a manner of speaking, Animo is the strongest element in the game because it's 5 elements in one, or in some cases, it's better than the original elements because every single target can swirl to other targets, so you have spread damage on top of spread damage on top of elemental reactions. Few non-Animo characters, if any, have the same area coverage as them, so if hypothetically you're running a freeze team consisting of Ayaka, Shinhua, and Shinto, instead of bringing a second Hydro character, you can bring an Animo unit like Kazuha, Suko, Serventi, and have them absorb Shinto's Hydro to deal Hydro damage themselves. Swirl might very well be the single most broken reaction in the game. Like, this reaction alone would be enough to make Animo top tier. Granted, it doesn't work as effectively for Vaporize or Melt since it prioritizes quantity over quality, but during 2022 and now 2023, players have been weaning off of Vaporize or Melt teams and going all in on reaction spam. And what better way to exercise that than through a reaction that spreads elements to every monster around it that also triggers a reaction. It would be one thing if it dealt elemental damage in an AoE but didn't trigger reactions, but Swirl can hypothetically take Hydro from one enemy and toss it onto another enemy affected by Electro to cause Electrocharge. Animo basically has all of its own benefits as well as the benefits and properties of whatever element it swirls at no drawback. The second reason is tied to the stat of choice. Some elements have a certain parameter associated with most of its cast members. For example, Hydro units are known for revolving around HP, which is even more evident by its elemental resonance, boosting the entire party's max health by 25%. Pyro units are very attack-centric. Resonance gives attack. Many of its characters have attack buffs like Shangling's Squall buff, Bennett's Fantastic Voyage, or Hu Tao's self buff. Shio's very defensive, with most of its roster scaling off defense. Animo's specific stat is Elemental Mastery, which it now shares with Dendro. Well, technically it's only Kazuha, Sucrose, Venti, and maybe Hazel, but seeing as two of them are tier 0 units, that's probably all you need anyway. Both Sucrose and Kazuha can supplement the team's DPS by essentially spreading their elemental mastery to everyone. Sucrose's passive talent increases her team's EM by 20% of hers whenever her skill or burst damages an enemy, while Kazuha grants an elemental damage boost to their party by a portion of his EM whenever doing Swirl. The convenient part is that you sacrifice very little damage by itemizing for elemental mastery since EM is inherently an offensive stat. Not only are you increasing your party's total DPS through buffs, but you're also boosting your own DPS from Swirl and any subsequent reaction, where most of your damage comes from anyway. Probably should have mentioned that actually. Let's say your Kazuha has 1000 EM and you trigger an Electro Swirl onto a target affected by Hydro. First, the damage from Swirl itself will scale off as 1000 EM, and then the ensuing Electrocharge reaction will also scale off as 1000 EM. It's a win-win, and a privilege not many characters have. Building defense on Noelle lets her convert a portion of that defense into attack, but since defense is not an offensive stat by nature, you're taking one step back to take 2 steps forward. Whereas Elemental Mastery is an offensive stat by nature, meaning you're taking 0 step back and 2 steps forward or even 3. Even for those who don't have built-in Elemental Mastery scaling like Venti can still benefit from the stat because of how many reactions he pulls off. That's why one of his best
This world is full of unsolved mysteries.
Dodge this!
If only the wind was a little stronger. Ad Astra Abyssosque. Thank you for completing today's commissions. Ad Astra Abyssosque.